Hello and welcome to the final episode of the season here on Talking Snooker with Phil Haigh and Nick Metcalf. Once again, talking about the game we all love.
Yeah, hello everybody. I don't think I could manage a hello as big as Nick at the minute. My voice is struggling at the end of the World Championships, so sorry about that. But I'll be struggling through because it's one more for the season, and then we'll have a little summer break. But we couldn't miss this one, the World Championship final. What an event!
We're a mess, aren't we? Total mess. I mean, you shouldn't say that as a podcast host, really. You should sort of say we're on great form, fine fettle. We're looking forward to everyone's company, that's true. But we're a mess. There's no question. I mean, after 17 days at the Crucible and all the qualifying and all the build up, it's just been weeks upon weeks of, I said on social media, being consumed in a way that we'd find hard to explain. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah.
pompous, but it's sort of true. Now, Phil, we've got a major story, of course. China's first world champion, Zhao Xintong, beating Mark Williams 18-12 in the final. We'll discuss the final, how he did it, the implications in a moment's time. But you have insisted, you said to me, that's all great, but I want to make sure that my story is covered near the top. And you say, you want to be addressed. That's okay. As world champion, Phil Haigh. I mean, you have won the Media World Championship. It's a great triumph. Many congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, very long odds that would have been beforehand. I know people were saying it was strange that Zhao Xintong was sort of sixth, seventh before he even started the qualifiers, but I don't know if I was sixth, seventh favorite even in the quarterfinals of this one. So I'm not sure how it's happened. I got through, won four frames. That's all it took. And delighted, yeah, very much surprised, but I got a very nice trophy to show for it. So very grateful for that.
You beat Diana Schuler in the final. It was exciting, wasn't it? Went all the way. I must admit, I made you second favourite maybe at one stage as you were going towards the colour. Bit of a pep talk from me. I said you got to find your inner Kyren. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that. Not saying that helped, but I don't think it hindered. And I mean, seriously, it was a bit. I don't know why I'm sort of maybe sounding sort of flippant because I don't think I saw the final last year. Proper match. You had the misrule. I've never played. Never played
No,
with a referee calling them. Have you?
no, I don't think so. But yeah, we had one of the BBSA guys reffing, so they took it seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both put each other back once. Um, yeah, it was a proper game. And yeah, I thought it was slipping away from me because she had a tricky start, but she got going and she's definitely a better player than I am. And she started making breaks in the middle. But just about scrapped back. I was lucky that she put herself in a snooker on the final pink, didn't she? And missed it twice. And then I was pretty pleased with the winning ball though. WPBSA coach Finn Ruan was there from Ireland, lovely man. I spoke to him at the party afterwards, and I was glad he said that was a good pressure pink because I was pleased with that. But yeah, delighted with the win.
Great snooker man, Finn. And we are going to forget things. That's another thing a podcast host shouldn't really say, but of course we are. But one thing I must say, you talk about Finn, their good friend from Ireland. Tremendous Irish contingent this year. I just spoke to a few guys actually last night after the final in the McCure Hotel. And they were saying they noticed it themselves, and they say there are always lots of Irish visitors. A lot of them would take maybe a year on year off or go 2 out of 3. And it just happened. One guy described it as an overlap year where so many of them meet up every year. They all seem to go this year. And seriously, what a sing song in the hotel and the pubs around last night, but loads of nights. I said it was like being at Cheltenham at times. It really was quite an Irish contingent. They added so much flavour. It was great to see them. Lots of friends of mine as well among that terrific Irish community at the tournament. So I'm glad that we had an early chance to mention that. But the story isn't really about Ireland, is it, Phil? The story is about China because Zhao Xintong is China's first world champion. I mean, it is a genuine moment of history in the game, no question about it. And, he got the job done with an 18-12 win over Mark Williams. We hope many of you join us with Rob Francis. I think one of our favourite episodes, really. Absolute wacky, wonderful episode live from Sheffield. Well, at that stage, it was 11-6. We did say, didn't we, after day one, that Mark Williams needed a strong third session. It didn't happen. It was the opposite. In fact, it was 6 of the 8 frames went to Zhao. It was 17-8 ahead. It was nearly a session to spare. That refunds issue was going to come up again potentially. But I noticed to my chagrin, although I did enjoy it, as did many people that worked on the last night. I went on Radio Snooker thinking I might do 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And of course, it went on for a lot longer than that. Mark Williams won 4 frames in a row. And there was just that feeling of, oh my goodness. But I did say, that us pundits and journalists say things like that sort of cliche, stranger things have happened. But actually, stranger things won't have happened. There would have been nothing stranger in the game, in my books, than someone 9 down with 10 to play and winning it in a world final. Zhao got the job done with a break of 87. And on the table, just got to say, he blitzed everybody. I like saying, since I've sort of realised it in my head, that his first match was before Rory McIlroy won the Masters. And that feels like a long time ago that Rory did that. Just shows, it wasn't just the 17 days, it was over a month of snooker. Someone pointed out, actually, to me last night, one of our Irish friends, that Elliot Slesser gave him the best game. Good way of saying it, actually. But in terms of the Crucible, he sort of cruised through pretty much all his matches and beat 2 greats, Ronnie O'Sullivan with a session to spare, Mark Williams nearly with a session to spare. You got to doff your cap. A set of great performances on the table, no question. In that sense, a worthy world champion.
Yeah, it was that game with Slesser was absolutely brilliant. Slesser was excellent in that game. Would have beaten almost anyone else. Um, and also there's another game he won 10-8 in the qualifiers, his second round against Long Zhihuang. So he was very, very much tested by those two. But yeah, it wasn't so much. He did cruise through, didn't he? But he was amazing at times. I thought he was brilliant against Jack Jones. Then I don't think he was so good. Certainly against Wakelin, he was actually quite bad against Wakelin, but Wakelin was just worse. I think that was the time if anyone was going to beat him, it was then. But he won, what was it, 13-5, because it was just bizarrely low standard.
Yeah,
And
bad
then
match, really.
yeah, and then you can't say he had a good draw because then he played Roddy O'Sullivan and Mark Williams, but both of them didn't play anything like the best. Certainly over the whole match, there were spells, and that 4 frame spell from Mark was amazing. But um, yeah, I would say people underperformed against him, but that's not his fault. He played great, worthy winner. You can't complain with that. Made so many big breaks. I felt like when I was watching the press room throughout the tournament, and it was a Zhao match. Every time I looked up and I hadn't been concentrating fully, I looked up at the screen and he was just in and around the black, just making breaks. Like they all looked the same. It was just he got in the same way with ridiculous consistency. Um, Looked quite machine-like, but in a very stylish machine. If it is a machine, it was very nice to watch. So yeah, a worthy winner.
I'd love to be described as a stylish machine. That's never going to happen. That's sort of very much a sort of clapped out old sort of tractor from the 70s, a bit more like in my case. But you're right about some players underperforming. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Zhao just sort of delivered what it mattered in matches, though. Someone would get a bit close to him, he'd do something else to get ahead. In the little bits of glimmers that Ronnie had in the semi, for example, Zhao would go again. And I'd say it was a borrowed observation, I'm pretty sure from Ronnie O'Sullivan, wasn't it? From you, but I'm glad he said it on here. I said it to loads of people, and that observation was so true from Ronnie that Zhao was knocking the first red in to leave himself on the black nearly
Yeah.
all the time. He wasn't doing that thing of, I'll go back to bulk and I might be able to get on a bulk color if I'm lucky. No, knocking them in, I'm on the black, I'm away again. I mean, it was that sort of metronomic thing that was kind of so impressive. And, it's a moment of history. A few people were saying last night, and that's, even leaving aside the situation which we'll come to, of course, that Zhao was involved in the match fixing scandal, but they were saying it just felt like all the years we talked about it, and it was just sort of suddenly happened. And I guess that was always going to be the way, really. I mean, so many of us thought it would be Ding Junhui. I mean, people saying, quite a few people I heard it say on television, and people saying to me, be bittersweet from Ding. I don't know if it will be. I don't know Ding that well, but it'll certainly be a time for reflection for him. He's seen as sort of the godfather of this generation, isn't he?
Mm.
It hasn't been Ding. He's only been in one final Ding, so he's wonderful, wonderful player, generational talent. But in terms of going close at the Crucible, really, really that many times, very close. But listen, he got to a recent semi. We know we're expecting loads from Wu Yisa, but it was Zhao Xintong that's crossed that barrier, crossed that lexicon, and become China's first world champion. Not a story without complications, of course. Zhao has recently returned from a ban for being involved in the sport's biggest ever match fixing scandal, but he didn't fix a match himself. He was a party to others fixing matches and for betting on matches. So for some people, it's very important to say they don't think it's tainting the victory because they told me that and told me that many times up there on Radio Snooker. Maybe the majority say second chances, slate wiped clean, doesn't taint it at all for them. For some, it does. For some, it is definitely not that clean feeling. And I think that's the way to say it, really. It's definitely not just a clean story. Life is very rarely clean, actually, in lots of different ways. There are often complications. That's the way it's gone. I think partly it's a timing thing. Would have been better next year or the year after for me. And I'm thinking in my head, and people sort of may ask, well, what's the difference? If, bad behaviour is bad behaviour then. If someone's, why can't they be forgiven straight away? Or, and Zhao is forgiven. Rehabilitation is important. He's right to be playing again. But I think that time's a sort of bit of a healer, isn't it? Had it gone further on, I don't think it would have felt so close. But anyway, enough waffling from me for now, Phil. A story with complications, on the table, brilliant. Off the table, has to be recognised. We're not quite getting that sort of complete clean story we might have had with like a Ding, eh?
Yeah, of course. It depends how much you want the World Championship winner to be a perfect fairy tale. And I guess it never is, or very rarely. Um, yeah, and it muddies the waters in terms of, I heard a lot of commentators referencing the fact he's an amateur, but not without explaining the full story. And that didn't work for me at all because he's only an amateur because of that sole reason. So if you're going to tell that story, you have to tell the whole side of the story. Um, yeah, it has to be put in context. I mean, in some ways, it's an even more incredible achievement. He's had to win through all those matches in qualifying, which is very difficult. Um, so he deserves even more praise, but in some ways, but only within the context of telling the whole story. So yeah, look, it's a bad mark on his CV. There's no one would deny that, even if you're fully accepting that he should come back and is able to play and everything, which I do think. But it's always going to be a check against him in the negative column, isn't it? So yeah, but at the same time, I certainly think he's served his punishment. He's back. He's able to play. So we crack on, and certainly from now on in, uh, it'll naturally just get talked about less and less because that's just how these things happen. He'll always be on his record, of course, but we move on, and he is going to be a huge, huge star. It'll be interesting to see how big a star he is over here. We know how big he's going to be in China. We think it's going to be absolutely massive. It'll be interesting to see how much that translates over here. But I hope it does because, despite what happened, of course, he seems like a great guy. Um, really sort of likable, charismatic, sort of low, sort of understated charisma to him. Um, so we'll see. But overall, it's got to be good for the game because people in China, people know about over there more than we do, I suppose. As I said, how much of a difference the World Championship would make. I know I spoke to Roger Layton, the coach over there before this tournament, who said the Chinese pool, eight-ball pool, is attracting a lot of young players now because the money's so big and they don't have to come over here to pursue a career in it. So a world champion from China now could be beautifully timed to attract a new sort of wave of players into the game. So it's got to be a positive for the game. Of course, there's a little black mark on his career forever, but I don't think it ruins it by any stretch.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about your voice. I mean, I tell you what, Phil, people will remember the much loved Whispering Ted Lowe. You're doing quite a good impression of Whispering Ted. I say that with affection. I don't know. I'm sorry. I mean, I was awfully ill after the Crucible last year. Uh, in some ways, I don't know how you can't be. I know you have a, you know, still a relatively new arrival in your life. That's not helping, of course. But those long days, those long nights with that tournament. I keep saying to people, I know Rob Francis has joined us in our last episode, and Rob, what a great guest you were. If you're listening, thank you so much. You were a wonderful value. I say it's 6 weeks. Don't give me that 17 days stuff. 6 weeks it is, certainly for us in the media. And that's a long time in mathematics terms, never mind emotional terms. Phil, there is a sort of spin-off story, for want of a better phrase, from Zhao Xintong. Now we know because he, as you rightly say, others are making the point, in terms of playing strictly on the table and what he had to do, he did jump through every hoop. Although some people won't agree that he should have played on Q Tour, of course, because his ban with the Chinese Federation is still in place. That's another nuance. But listen, the WPPSA have explained to you and explained to others that they've always taken the recommendation of the independent tribunal. So they're saying he can play. He came back through the amateur ranks, of course, won back his professional status. Has now got all these ranking points, isn't he? He just won £500,000. So that's obviously a lot of ranking points. Now, a number of players are not happy. This was something that Ken Doherty asked. I thought pretty quite direct fashion. In fairness to Ken, I think as he should, as pundits should, frankly. I think Ken used the phrase "up in arms," and WPBSA Jason Ferguson, had to answer that. I mean, he will keep his ranking points, but the problem is that there is a paragraph in the WST entry pack that does sort of state quite clearly, and I'll read this out actually, talking about qualification for the season to come, 25-26. This is what players received at the start of the season. Top 64 from prize money rankings after the World Championship 2025. An amateur player can qualify in the top 64. However, their ranking points will always reset to 0 at the start of each season. That amateur will count as a top 64 player, and a player ranked 64 would fall outside the top 64 and fail to qualify. Additional tour spaces will be announced in due course. Tour places at the sole discretion of WST. A lot of people say that sentence at the end is probably quite important, but WST said this in a statement to journalists before the final, that the principle clearly established in snooker is that amateurs can earn prize money and ranking points in the same way that professionals do, and there are many precedents for this. Zhao has earned his top 64 place on merit. He will keep the ranking points he has earned, and if he wins the World Championship, he will be seeded second for most events next season, which again is a long-standing principle. Our entry pack was agreed with the Players' Board before the start of this season. We accept that the wording in this particular paragraph could have been clearer, but the principles are unchanged and well established. Well, that might be okay with those last few words there, but I mean, saying there the wording could have been clearer. It does seem a sort of contradiction, really. I would say, what they're saying in that paragraph, what's actually happening, seemed to me like, pretty different things. And he's going to number 11, I think I might be saying, in the world now. That will push Ali Carter out of the top 16. So a number of people are going to suffer from this, Ali Carter being one of them. I mean, what do you make of this line that wording could have been clearer? I mean, that's a bit of a fudge, isn't it?
It is very strange. Like in a way, it is very clear. I think they mean the wording could have just been completely different, really, because it's quite obvious what it means to an extent. Although it is quite confusing. The line about how he would be counted as a top 64 player, but on 0 points. I don't even know how that would work. That would be very odd. So none of it made great sense. Um, I've got no problem at all with him keeping his points. I think it would almost be absurd to have the world champion starting on 0 and be ranked 1 to 8 or whatever he would be. So it's a much more accurate reflection of world rankings that he's in the top 16. But the fact that they've told players something else was going to happen beforehand, unintentionally or not, they're saying it was not intentional and it was just badly written. It's not good, and you can see why players are annoyed about it. Um, Ultimately, it might not make much difference to Ali because as world champion, he's going to be seeded 2 for everything anyway. So whether he was ranked there or not, he would knock Ali out of all those top 16 comps anyway. So, but that's sort of a separate wrinkle, though. That doesn't really address why they're not doing what they said they were going to do. So it's all a bit of a mess, really. And at best, they've just written their own rules down very poorly to the extent where they're going to do the opposite of what those rules said. So that's not great, even if it was just a mistake.
No, that's a very fair way of saying it. And again, all this mess is created by the bad behaviour of those involved in the match fixing scandal. That's created this mess. If those guys had not done this, we wouldn't have these issues. Yeah, we'd have other issues. There are always issues in sport, and I made clear, by the way, to various people in WST, and I'll happily say it now. You know, this is not a snooker problem. This is a problem across sport. We're seeing various situations in all manner of sports now. I mean, look, uh, what's happening in cycling in the last 20, 30 years has sunk to the highest heavens. It's been appalling, actually. All manner of outrageous cheating, far outstripping anything in snooker. And yet no one sort of, you know, is not going to settle down, I don't think, and enjoy the Tour de France this summer and the other great races. So we'll keep it in perspective. I think while I don't think these things should be forgotten, and maybe there was a little bit of that, a bit of whitewashing and sometimes a bit of brushing under the carpet, not completely, but a little bit, at times during this tournament. I also don't want to think that, anyone believes that this is just a problem for this sport. It's not. But, that's a bit of a mess, frankly. That, and I can see why certain players and, Mark Allen's been outspoken, hasn't he, on social media? He's been one of those as well, saying that, it's just, not on really, and the players just aren't happy about the situation, and you can kind of see why. Phil, the moment of history. I have been doing a number of interviews today, and I must extend my thanks to you and various other people in the game that some of them may be listening, some of them maybe not, but I was very grateful because a lot of complicated issues have arisen from this, including sort of in political terms. But I tell you what, one BBC interview I did, the researcher mentioned, and it sort of came up a little bit in the interview as well, about sort of soft power. Now, the Chinese flag was held aloft, waved very proudly by Zhao Xintong. I mean, there's been some talk on social media about this, some people not liking it at all. I don't really have a problem with it, if I'm honest. I mean, I think it's no more soft power, and others have made this point, than the whole manner of sports. It's like, okay, Zhao did this in the UK, but it's I don't see how it's enormously dissimilar than many of our gold medalists at the Beijing Olympics, for example. Holding flags aloft in China. In snooker, Neil Robertson did it in 2010. There are others I can think of, Wales, Scottish, I think English too, players that have done it in recent times. Just when I've covered events at a lower level of snooker that have raised flags, I don't see a big problem with it. Some didn't like it. I have to say, Rob Moore from The Sun, our colleague in the press room that always has a way of tapping into these moments, said it was a PR masterstroke from the manager. Those images will be across Chinese television this morning, Tuesday morning, and no doubt, in Chinese newspapers, Chinese websites as well. So, yeah, I didn't have a big problem with it, really. I thought it was in context with sport. I didn't see it as some big soft power thing. I think he used the word paranoid in one of the interviews I did. I think that would seem quite paranoid. What's your view?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't know there was any sort of furore on about it. I wasn't really on Twitter much last night because we were obviously at the final, doing the press conferences, and then went to the party. So I didn't know there was any sort of issue about it. Obviously, I saw it happen, but I've seen sports people hold flags up thousands of times. I didn't really consider that it was any sort of problem. You know, fighters sometimes go to the ring or the cage with a flag and then raise it up afterwards. All the Olympics, I suppose you're there more specifically representing your country, but they literally are given flags at the end of every race or
Mm.
thing to wave about. And it's not something we shy away from anything. We've got the flags by their name on the scoreboard at the bottom of the screen. So yeah. I mean, I was baffled by why anyone cared at all, and I certainly didn't. Now I'm no expert on Chinese politics. What's that could maybe that was something that I don't understand that was pushed for to be on television. But in terms of being bothered by it, just not even a tiny bit.
Well, soft power is quite a hard thing to define. You know, there's a lot of nuance. A lot of people said to me, I always use the word nuance, and I've maybe got to cut down on that. That's a resolution for next season. You know, there's no doubt that when countries host the Olympics, and China's had summer and winter games in Beijing in recent times, there's an element of soft power about the way they put those shows on. Probably the element of soft power about the way London put the Olympics on, I imagine. But when it comes to sports stars winning an event like this, yeah, I didn't really particularly bother me, I have to say. Phil, we're not trying to do an absolute marathon for reasons of us, struggling somewhat. But I think we've done about half an hour, if not a bit over there. So let's just say, shall we, that we are bringing you here our final episode of the season here on Talking Snooker with Phil Haigh and Nick Metcalf. Zhao Xintong is the world champion, China's first ever world champion, and we are reflecting on the world championship. And I'm going to say vintage tournament. You can come and say no, you can't have that with one semi, with one session, not even played, and nearly that for the final. But I don't think it should just be the final. Various colleagues and very wise ones were lamenting that it wasn't a big final now. People won't see it as a good tournament. Well, I think the more discerning ones still will. It was brilliant, brilliant value. I do think, I have to say, I was thinking about this last night when I was on the air radio snooker, and actually, it didn't culminate, but in some ways, the absolute magic high point was the Higgins Williams last Wednesday. And it sort of never got as good as that again. But then, of course, it didn't get as good as that in some ways. It was a classic for the ages. So I think a good tournament. It's a slight tinge that such a vintage tournament couldn't have had an absolutely wondrous ending. But no, I think it was pretty good. Maybe you'll vote in the tournament. I mean, I know Dave Hendon was saying at one stage top three. I don't know whether that would have changed for him later on. He's obviously a great judge, seen so many of them. I think Michael McMullen was saying it was very high for him. That's the way I would see it. Most in the press room, most people that I know are kind of taking that view.
Yeah, it was really good, and I think. Although I think after the first week we were thinking, oh, this could be the best ever. And then maybe it just slipped away a little bit. But having said that, like the Williams Higgins game was probably the highlight. But then Williams Trump semi was absolutely brilliant as well.
Mm.
Because the other semi was a bit of a letdown, but also really interesting. And the final, yeah, not a classic final really. But well, those four frames at the end from Williams was a fantastic few minutes there. So
Yeah.
they were great bits. But yeah, the first round was really tremendous, really, really excellent. Um, so yeah, whether it would, I don't know. I don't have a best ever really. I think my favourite, certainly since covering, was when Luca won. Really, that was just
Mm.
relentless carnage, and I don't think it was as good as that one actually, probably, but very good. Yeah, I don't know what I'd rate it out of 10, but yeah, it was brilliant. It was good.
Good call on 23, actually. I mean, I'd have to look back at other individual matches, but even just thinking about the last week that Luca had himself, I was in there for the last session when he beat Ronnie, ridiculous recovery against Junhui, tremendous final. Yeah, I can see why, just thinking about that was a very, very good addition. So, generally very good. TV, good coverage. I think the BBC did tackle the Zhao Xintong situation sort of particularly late on in the tournament. Maybe could have done a bit more earlier. I suspect they did some of the later stuff. I can't sign this away in any kind of document, but I suspect some of the talk from the press room may have pressed him into sort of more talk later on. There was also discussion on TNT about it towards the closing stages of the tournament. I mean, Dennis Taylor and Shaun Murphy, will they be swapping Christmas cards this festive time? I don't know. That was some exchange, wasn't it?
It was funny, yeah. Yeah, I meant to ask Sean about that. I've not seen him since, but I would like to know how that ended. I'm sure they're fine. But it was a funny little moment. Um, because I mean, I thought it was fine for Sean to say what he said. Then I suppose Dennis was talking about Dennis could have been speaking about anyone, so they might not have seen him before, but it was an entertaining bit of commentary for sure, unintentionally.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I knew the point that Sean was making for sure. His guy's been around. I mean, the line of Star is Born that was being aired towards the end. I mean, I think I like Hazel Irvin's take, really. A Star is Reborn. I think that's the way to say it, really. He's won the UK Championship in 2021. It's either one of the biggest tournaments in the game or it's not. You can't say A Star is Born, 3.5 years on from winning one of the biggest tournaments. Doesn't make sense.
I think
Anyway,
that line was used when he won that tournament.
it
So
was. It was. Made it even more barking mad, yeah. So good coverage, I think, across the board, generally on television. So many big voices. Some of them join us on here, of course, on Talking Snooker, including our last episode with Joe Johnson, John Parrott among them. Abby, of course, joined us. Lots of good interviewers. I know I mentioned Rishi Prasad, very good value on the BBC, I think.
he is good, isn't he? I like him, man.
Very, very, very good. Hazel, good, And I think always very strong. Nancy, Rachel do a great job on TNT. All the big voices we know in commentary, of course. And it's a big effort. It's a big effort for everyone. But those TV teams, they marathon long hours. For the benefit and enjoyment of the viewer, they put in a tremendous effort, all of them, and that should be noted. Really big effort for the broadcasters. Phil, look, we have actually had some news, haven't we? Not concrete news, but there are reports, aren't there, that there will be a change in broadcasting arrangements for next season, with ITV set to lose tournaments from 2026. It's reported that Matchroom Media is poised to take over the production of a number of snooker events and also darts events. And Barry Hearn was asked about this, wasn't he, in his press conference, and says there'll be a mixture of channels involved, some free to air and some pay TV. So we do, as we understand it, think we'll see some snooker on ITV next season, but only for some of the season. There'll be the Champion of Champions on that channel. But after that, things are a bit up in the air. So we'll wait to hear about that. But obviously, that is one to keep an eye on. But would anything stand out for you from TV coverage from the last sort of 17 days? I mean, it's needle in a haystack. There's a million things, but just very good overall. Feel free to pick out some highlights.
Yeah, well, all those people you mentioned are all reliably good. We know how good they are, and all in different ways. I think Abby's great at all the stuff she does on there. She's willing to do anything that the BBC asks her to do on there. She's very good at it. It was an interesting addition with Lee Walker being on commentary during some of
Mm,
Mark's matches. I don't know what other people think about this. You can let us know.
mm.
But I think he's great to have in as a pundit, obviously, as knowing him better than anyone else. But I thought having him commentate on Mark's matches probably wasn't the right move, I don't think, just because he's too close to it. That the end of that match, he almost went quite silent because he was so nervous. Because I did ask Mark this actually, he didn't give me the details because I wouldn't expect him to. But Lee is probably sort of financially hanging on those games. He'll probably get a different amount of money if he wins or loses. So to have him in commentary, I think it would be unfair on everyone involved. Have him in the studio so you can cut to him and ask him stuff straight away afterwards. That's fine, but probably wouldn't do that again, in my opinion.
No, I think that's very well expressed, actually. It's something that struck me. It's something that struck a lot of people, I'm sure, as well. I felt we could have heard a bit more from Joe Perry. I think he's a smashing voice, Joe. He's hinted a little bit, not much, but listen, there were some top voices throughout, no question, and thanks to all the broadcasters involved. And how do you sum up that show? I mean, it takes over our lives. We're going to get our lives back in the days to come, thank God. It's more than new than night. I say it time and again. I say it every year on here, and every year I said it in life. I think for about whatever decades now that I just love it that snooker's on. Today, switching on the telly, oh, it's not there. It's like, where's our beloved game gone? Seniors to come, of course. World
Yeah.
Seniors at the Crucible, live on Channel 5 here in the UK in the coming days. But that's what the miss is, as much as anything. That's why people have the blues and we have withdrawal symptoms because the game's just on all day and all night, and we miss it so much. And there's nothing to come close to it. I had this conversation with quite a few people. You always forget again there's no question about it. And I know some people that don't really like the Triple Crown, situation, the way that's come about. One of the reasons they don't is this is far and away above. I mean, I don't mind that because I think people understand that nuance again. Um, but it's miles and away the biggest event, isn't it? It's just ridiculous. And going back to what a key figure in snooker once said to me many years ago now was, it's not just a different event to anything else in snooker. It sometimes feels like almost a different sport because we almost take on new frontiers, don't we? Even in our job, we go, not always personally invited, but colleagues are. We sometimes are. Big interviews with big networks, big stations, big telly. The greatest one in the world. That's never happening for the Scottish Open in Edinburgh, Phil, unless something extraordinary happens.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was on the Today program the other day for the first time. I don't think I'd get that during the Players' Championships there, and that's not a bad one. Um, Thankfully, my voice was in better nick then than it is now. But yeah, no, it's just the sheer scale of it. I mean, you can hear what it's done to me, but it makes you emotional all throughout the whole thing because
Mm.
you're sort of going through ups and downs. But um, and there's times where you think, oh, I'm looking forward to the end of this, and you feel really bad thinking that, but that's just the hours you're working, really. But then as soon as it finishes, you're like, oh, get me back in there. It's so good. So yeah, it's a unique experience, and I wouldn't swap it for anything.
What a lovely way to maybe leave the World Championship there for now. Well, only in terms of us talking about it. We've got correspondence now, and much of it on the World Championship. Um, Andrew Fairweather, I mentioned this before. You sent us an absolutely wonderful email. I think in the circumstances of us not feeling at our tip-top best by any means, you say it's marathon, and I'm going to praise it a bit if that's okay with you. You talk about your earliest memories of the game as a young boy watching Pot Black with your dad, your parents buying you a 4x2 table. One of the highlights of your youth, you say, growing up in Ipswich, and I know many of our older listeners will like this, the Tolly Cobbold Classic held at the Corn Exchange each year. I would love to see competitive snooker return there. You said your uncle used to promote and sponsor the event. He owned a couple of sports shops in the town and would sell cues tables and other things behind the stands in the old days. And you'd go and stand with your dad all week and get into the snooker free as it was February half term in every session. You got to meet and know all the players and get their autographs. Favourite player was Cliff Thorburn. For some reason, your dad's was Alex Higgins. Your uncle had a full-size table in the house. It's hard to place. A lot of this is good stuff, actually. It's lovely memories. It really is. And you say that your dad and you started to attend the Masters at Wembley, and for his 60th, you took, your wife and mother for their very first ever snooker event. And your dream was to see a 147. Your dad saw Graham Miles miss a pink once for one. And you guessed it, he says, we were there the night Ken Doherty missed the black off the spot. And that was, famous night in the game. And, well, let's see now. You say a few years ago your boss started insisting I take an hour lunch break at work. That doesn't happen in many industries now. We're lucky to wolf a sandwich down at the desk. You took to the local club to play a few times each week. And what do you got? You hit the dizzy heights of the 50 plus breaks. That's reminiscent of me. I hit the dizzy heights of 21, didn't I, Phil? 3 reds and 3 pinks. You do say that you say that sadly your dad became ill 13 years ago, 3 years ago, and was diagnosed with terminal cancer. You say that 2 of his favourite players were coming to the Corn Exchange, Jimmy White and Ronnie O'Sullivan. It was hit and miss if he would be out of hospital to be able to attend, but you looked for tickets and you noticed the possibility of VIP tickets, but they were sold out. You emailed the people organising and explained the situation, and they asked you to meet them there, and they would see what they do. And they took you backstage. And you say, yeah, your dad got to meet 2 of his heroes. You got a picture there with Bonnie O'Sullivan. Although you say whoever took it blurred it, and you even got a photo of you holding the World Championship trophy, and you said you felt like a schoolboy again here, taking your dad instead of the other way around. It was the last thing we were able to do together, you say, and it meant the world to you. You say, sadly, your club closed down, but a friend and I have now found a social club in a little Suffolk village with one table in its own room where we play most weeks, you say. I'm still playing better than I probably have all my life, and my love of the game has returned. And that's absolutely lovely. We're glad to hear that. And, you say you started listening to your podcast, which give you such wonderful insights into the game. And I think you handle some of the issues in the game with such honesty and genuineness. That's very kind of you to say. And you've even started to go and watch again. You've been to Brentwood on the first Monday. We're going to vow to not pick on Brentwood so much, aren't we, next year, Phil? You say some great players. And last year fulfilled an ambition that you're it's great players. And you say, my wife and I took my dad to the world final, Mark Williams and Matthew Stevens, but only went on the Sunday. You couldn't get tickets for the Monday, so you always wanted to see the trophy lifted. Last year, you got a ticket for the final two sessions, paying the ridiculous price, you say, for a VIP ticket in the evening. And who was my legend that day? None other than Cliff Thorburn, who remembered my uncle and playing in Ipswich, as did Steve Davis and Dennis Taylor when I met them in Norwich last year, reliving the Blackpool final. This is quite hard to praise you, Phil, because there's some great stuff here. It's lovely memories. And this year, you say you're fulfilling another wish of going to the Crucible in the two-table scenario. So you had a ticket for the Sunday and Monday evening. It's on table 2 and can't wait. And that's brilliant. And we hope you had a really good time. You have some mixed feelings about the game going forward. You do think the British stronghold on staging events does need to end, and it spread a bit more, especially in North America and Europe. You are sceptical about Saudi Arabia's involvement, especially Mr. O'Sullivan's involvement, although you can't say too much, you say. I still need his signature after all. You think the level of snooker that you see now played is extraordinary, and I'm loving watching it on Eurosport, or wherever it is now, TNT here in the UK, as well as ITV and the BBC. What about the Crucible debate? I get both sides of the argument completely, and it'll be such a shame to lose it. Perhaps if we do switch another tournament there, such as the UK Championship or something else. I really miss Wembley. It was wonderful, and I haven't been to the Masters anywhere else yet. But most of all, would love to see it back in East Anglia, here at the Corn Exchange. I share your passions of all sports, having been to some of the biggest sporting events in the world: football, cricket, rugby World Cup finals, both summer and winter Olympics, and every football final you can imagine. But snooker is the one for me. Thanks to your podcast and for helping me get back so strongly with the game that I love. If you ever want a spectator on the show, give me a call. If you did bump into Brian Wright at the Crucible last year and had a chat, another great moment. Andrew, well, that's lovely, Phil. What lovely memories. And it ties in with so much, isn't it, that we all have for that, snooker, whatever our favourite sport is sometimes the people, isn't it? Talks about his late dad there, people in the family, and we've got another family member coming up actually later on with one of the other bits of correspondence. It's the memories you take through the years of all the tournaments and I've always thought sport's a great constant. There's not a lot of things in life that are these days, but our football clubs, like Barnsley for you, they stick with you throughout life. You're sort of remembering the 90s teams recently, and you'll follow them years and decades, I'm sure, into the future. And whatever, I'm sort of waxing a bit over lyrical here, probably, as I do sometimes, but that's the beauty of sport. And the way he's tied in with Cliff being his favourite player, seeing Cliff at the Crucible, that's frankly one of the so many reasons why sport's magical for us, eh?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think most sports, your memories are sort of tied to your family a bit because you've gone with your parents to watch it, or they've taken you to play it, or whatever. And almost everyone in snooker is their grandparents they've watched it with, or their dad's taken them along for the first time. So it's all linked. And then the older you get, when people pass away and stuff, those memories become even more special and important to you. So yeah, it's a nice thing about sport, more so than, I don't know, other interests that you might have. You might be really into music, and that might be a more something you do on your own, or maybe your friends or something. It might be less sort of family based, but sport seems to be always have those links, which are really nice as you look back on them.
Indeed, and maybe we'll move on to Graham Walsh now. Say thanks so much, Andrew, for writing. It meant a lot. You've also given us some lovely photos, and now we've got another lovely bit of correspondence from Graham.
Yeah, I'll try and get through this without squeaking too much.
Do you want me to read out? Do you want to read out all of them?
I think I can do this one.
Okay,
I'll leave
good
you
man.
to the last one.
Okay.
Um, I'm writing this just a few minutes after the end of the World Championship final. And what a World Championship. Every day a story. Okay, the final wasn't an absolute classic, but elite sport is sometimes just enjoying seeing the best reach the pinnacle. Fantastic from Zhao Xintong. We've seen history being made and great post-match words from Williams offering genuine praise for a worthy champion. I get that. I get that some question whether Zhao should be playing and whether his win tarnishes snooker, but I see it as the ultimate redemption story. A young man makes a mistake, admits his guilt, takes his punishment, and turns it around to come back stronger than ever. Was this the most attacking championship ever? There seemed few long frames in the later stages. Players spread the reds with positive safety shots. Potters triumphed. Even Stephen Hendry seemed to enjoy it. The Crucible was splendid as ever. The atmosphere was welcoming, the seats comfy, the view excellent, and the buzz when you walk through the doors can't be matched. Congratulations to everyone involved. My only gripe is the TV direction. Too many camera angles missing important cannons or positional shots. Just because you can have a close up or a pocket cam doesn't mean you have to. Now it's all over. Here's the start of next season. Graham. Thank you, Graham. I like that point about the most attacking championship ever. Hard to judge, but yeah, a lot of frames. I mean, judging by Zhao Xintong winning, obviously, were done very quickly. There weren't too many scrapping along. There weren't too many really late night finishes, were there? Unless I've forgotten any.
No, and the speed of the matches it was striking towards the end in particular. It was so many times I was like, what's the time? An hour gone. The first four frames are gone. It was happening time and time again in sessions. I think even like um, what was that? It was the third session, which I say time and time again. So many parts of the tournament are evocative. The last Saturday for me is right up there in the evocative league, if you like. The morning Saturday and evening of that, every one of those brings back memories throughout my lifetime. And I love the Saturday morning, the final one. This one was over by half 12. It was great stuff. Mark Williams took an important lead, 13-11. But the speed of it and the speed of the final, it just was, they were not messing about. It was, yeah, so good point. And also, it's not a bad point about the TV direction as well. Again, that's not just a snooker thing. I sort of follow, I'm obsessed with all sports really. And yeah, there's a trend to focus away from the actual sport now onto the periphery. I think we see it in a lot of things now. And no, it's a good point you make, Graham, and I'll definitely will take the talking, Phil. David Robson next. Hello, Nick and Phil. Nice touch. Firstly, thank you for the excellent podcast. I think I would class as a long-time listener, having discovered Talking Snooker in 2021. I've been an avid listener ever since. This is my first time emailing in. I'm a huge snooker fan, but don't know too many other fans. So listening in to you two really does feel like checking in with old friends as you accompany me on my walks to escape the work from home grind. Please do continue the excellent work. And listen to this, Phil. If you ever considered starting a Patreon or something similar with extra content, I would definitely subscribe. Well, that's very kind of you, something we haven't considered, but yeah, thank you, David. My snooker journey started while growing up in the 90s and watching on TV with my grandma and granddad. I then became a keen viewer of the Triple Crown events on the BBC, with Matthew Stevens being an early favourite. I remember having to record the end of the 2000 final on VCR as it finished too late for school night, getting up early the next morning to watch the conclusion, and being gutted that Matthew lost out to Mark Williams. A lot of fans of Matthew Stevens, by the way. I hear that a lot. Sometimes
He
that's
was one
on.
of my favourites for a while, for sure,
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
kid.
Lots of people like Matthew Stevens, and with good reason. Still is in some ways, but back in those days, really was smashing player. In my teenage years, I got to go and see some live snooker for the first time, taking my grandma to see the old Premier League snooker when it came to Grimsby, near where she lived. We saw the likes of Ronnie, Jimmy, Hendry, Higgins, and Murphy, and I know my grandma was always very proud to tell her friends that her grandson had taken her to watch the snooker. Sadly, she's no longer with us, but I always think of her when watching. One of the great things about snooker is the longevity of the players. So many of the great names I grew up with watching with my grandma are still going strong now. You're right, that's a great part of snooker as well. My interest continued from there to the point where it's now overtaken football for me as my number one sport. I sometimes think that it might be close for me, actually, but I think my obsession with football is so great that I don't think it probably has. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Your podcast has definitely helped with that, including introducing me to things like the Championship League and qualifiers that I wasn't aware of as being things you could watch before. Weirdly, having religiously watched every World Championship since the late 90s and having attended the Premier League Snooker, the UK Championship in York, and the short-lived Hull residency of the Tour Championship. Well, that's underrated and understated there. Short-lived, yeah. It wasn't until last year that I finally made it to the Crucible. A friend and I saw a feisty second-round encounter between Shaun Murphy and Stephen Maguire. This year we experienced the one-table set-up for the first time, as we were lucky enough to get tickets for the Saturday morning session, the one I mentioned, between Judd Trump and Mark Williams. An incredible experience. It really did feel like a full circle moment for me and my snooker interest all those years after the 2000 final. I've just about forgiven Willow for beating Matthew, and it was a privilege to see him rolling back the years and producing some amazing snooker against the world number one, who didn't do a lot wrong. I was rooting for Mark in the final, but congratulations to Zhao Xintong, a deserving winner. I know this has been a complete ramble, and I won't be offended in the slightest if you don't read it out or heavily edit it. I don't really have anything profound to say other than long live snooker, long live the Crucible, and long live talking snooker. That's for this season, chaps. Enjoy a well-deserved break, and I'll be tuning in as ever next season. Cheers, David. Much appreciated, David. We're really most grateful for that. And I know what you mean about those full circle, those sort of anniversary things. And I actually did have 30 years for myself, Phil, in recent days since I first went for the first day of the, I think I may have said that on here, I'm not sure, the Stephen Hendry Nigel Bond final. I remember picking up a greenan. I went with my old uni friend, Michael Hunter. And I know I said this in the past on here. There is a link, a genuine link there with snooker. Michael's father, Nick, kindly got us the tickets. He was heavily involved, Nick Hunter, in television snooker, the man in some ways to help put the sport on television, and others too, darts, and he was heavily involved in rugby league, but that was a nice link. And yeah, can't believe really it's been 30 years. Unrecognisable. I was thinking, Winter Garden wasn't even there. The whole railway station is completely unrecognisable. Bits in the centre, and yet some bits are the same. I guess that's the nature of cities, but yeah, and it certainly embraces it. And we mentioned that footprint outside Tudor Square being brilliant. But listen, yeah, thanks for that, David, and lovely memories from you. And obviously, you love your snooker, and we really appreciate you tuning in. And Chris Marshall next says, "Hi guys, it's a very awkward situation for Chinese snooker. The Chinese Billiards and Snooker Association upheld the original ban on Zhao Xintong playing any kind of snooker in China. They're an honourable nation, and as a matter of ethics, make an example of those found guilty. They did not reduce the original ban for accepting guilt. As far as I'm aware, Zhao is therefore banned from snooker in China until July. No one seems to have reported this." Well, I don't think that's true, actually, in fairness. I think it has been reported. I wonder if the Chinese will be proud of their first world champion, or try and brush it under the carpet as a non-event due to his status in the country. He's been the best player for 4 weeks, deserves his title, and is now a favourite among the British fans. So if any negative reaction from China, he will have plenty of home support from Sheffield. I'll be interested to hear your views on this. Keep up the great work, Chris. I mean, listen, it's a fair point. It has been covered, fairly extensively, certainly in the written press. And the WPBSA, I think I'm right in saying, Phil, have sort of taken this view. We are going to recognise the bans that were imposed by the independent tribunal. That's what we're going to do, separate to what's happening in China. It is awkward. There will be some people that think, Zhao should maybe have not played in those, Q tour events. There's that line about not being in good standing, isn't there, which we know about with the home federation. And obviously, I don't think he can be because he's, banned. So listen, I don't know if you can, maybe your voice can hold up for a bit. It is, undoubtedly an awkward one. It's undoubtedly a difficult one that he is banned by his, home federation, if you like. And, it adds to what is a messy situation, and it's one that has to be addressed. We have to keep, that on the back burner while saying this guy's a great player and a world champion. there is a mess that has been created by the match fixing scandal, and this is, frankly, another little part of that mess.
Yeah, it is weird. Is that I looked at that today actually, the entry packs, entry forms, those Q Tour events, and it's in big bold capital letters that you need to be in good standing with your national federation. And if you're banned by your national federation, that's clearly not, is it? I mean, good standing sounds like it could be quite vague in certain situations, but I think banned is quite clearly not in good standing. So, and yeah, it has been reported, Chris, because I've reported it. And I asked Mason Ferguson about it months ago before Zhao was even back. And that's when he said, yeah, they're just going to stick to their bans for it and he can play. But I mean, that wasn't really an explanation, though. It was saying what was going to happen, but I've not really heard why that's fine to do. So I know there's reasonable questions as to why that is happening, and we've not had the answers really. Um, but that ban ends when July, so he's not going to miss any snooker because of it coming up. But yeah, there's certain people who don't think he should be back now because even though his official ban ended, he maybe shouldn't have played Q Tour because of that rule. But yeah, that's what they decided to do. Um, that's what's happened.
Yeah, that's the about the long and short of it. Thanks for your message, Chris. Your email, indeed, the word awkward stands out. Yeah, much of this whole situation is awkward. Frankly, there are often no easy answers. There are various complications, and I say it will rumble on. It will, as you rightly say, it will lessen because the nature of those stories do lessen. Having said that, there'll be other players coming back. So there'll be little nuances and situations. Nuance again, yeah. Maybe people are right, Phil. When we get other players coming back, there'll be issues there as well. But that's the nature of it. It was a scandal. We don't use that word lightly. It was a terrible blight on the sport, and the offshoots of that will continue to unfortunately impinge on what we hope is much more uncomplicated enjoyment of the sport. That's not how sport works or life works, though, as we know often. Eamon Moore next. Hello, gents. I hope you are well. I've never emailed in before, and I've only tweeted you guys once, but I'm no longer on social media, which is when you cover the match fixing bans handed out to players from China incredibly well. I was therefore delighted to see Nick quoted on the situation of Zhao reaching the final and his previous ban on the BBC Sport website on May the 3rd. That was Steve Sutcliffe that wrote that piece. He asked me to comment on that piece, and actually it was further quoted in the Telegraph piece. It was a very BBC bashing piece, actually, from a golf journalist I know pretty well called James Corrigan. And well, that was the view of James, and I was quoted in that piece as, in James's view, being a difference between what the BBC was putting on their website and what they were actually doing on television. James didn't think enough talk about it on television. But anyway, our correspondent here, Eamon, says, Nick summarises my thoughts on the situation perfectly. It was incredibly frustrating to hear usually excellent pundits and commentators gloss over what is clearly a very serious matter, serious enough to warrant a ban. Is Zhao a very talented player? Yes. Did he do incredibly well to win the tournament as an amateur, having come through the qualifiers? Yes. But the reality is he's an amateur who had to come through the qualifiers because just a few months ago he was banned from the game. His win is obviously going to be huge for the game in China, but further afield, I'm not sure his landmark achievement will resonate as much because of his history. Nick hit the nail on the head with his comments, and I think sadly the final was a concerning reflection on the current state of the game. A player recently returned from a match-fixing ban. Didn't fix matches himself, of course, but he was involved with a match-fixing scandal against the oldest finalist in Crucible history. No way intended as a criticism of Mark Williams, who I think is absolutely wonderful. Keep up the excellent work, both. And as listeners to a certain DJ used to say, love the show, Steve. Warm regards, Eamon. And that's Steve Wright, isn't it? Who we sadly lost not so long ago. I certainly enjoy listening to on the wireless for many, many years and decades. Well, Gary Moss, that great judge of the game, we were talking in the pub one night, and he was making the point that he didn't think the class of 92 in overall terms, were especially special, if you like, in this tournament. Uh, Probably definitely true in the case of Vonnie. John Higgins, I think, played well in times, definitely. And Mark definitely did beat Judd Trump in a semi, but he thought it wasn't the best reflection that they'd all get deep, their time of life. But then they are absolutely exceptional players. So that's got to be, recognised as well. But, as for Zhao, yeah, I mean, thanks for your kind words. And, say that just sort of repeating ourselves a little bit. But, this situation, has to be sort of reflected and reported. That's, us doing our job as far as I can see it. And while recognising that, of course, the performances on the table were brilliant from Zhao. That's the end of the correspondence, Phil. I don't know who's more relieved about that. Probably the listeners, I think. We're almost at the end, aren't we? We're almost at the end. We're going to have a look back at the season in the very final segment of the final episode here on Talking Snooker with Phil Haigh and Nick Metcalf. The seasons in snooker are always special. You never look back and think, oh, that was a bit of a humdrum one. They're always great. So many stories again throughout the campaign, and a bit of a chronological look through here. And we kicked off, didn't we? It feels like an awful long time ago last summer. Ali Carter winning the Championship League. Judd Trump won the Shanghai Masters, big tournament there, beating Shaun Murphy 11-5 in the final. Then Kyren Wilson came to the party, and we get a real early sign of his intentions as world champion. He would perform brilliantly throughout the campaign. Didn't really have a bad patch, and he kicked it off last summer, winning the Xi'an Grand Prix, beating Judd Trump 10-8 in the final, the first of 3 wins for him over Trump in finals during this season that's coming to an end. And then Judd Trump won the Saudi Arabian Masters, and that is now, of course, known as the sport's 4th major, and he won it 10-9 against Mark Williams in the final. Hell of a dramatic climax. When it comes to, finals, we saw lots of good ones. That was right up there. But we've got to say time and again, Phil, Kyren Wilson, I said I voted him as player of the season. Crucible winners are a mixed bag. We know that thanks to your piece, and he said nuance again. But he did brilliantly throughout the campaign, didn't he? Got to say, hats off to Kyren. I love it that he never really had a proper bad patch. Started well, middle was good, end was good. Okay, Crucible wasn't good for him, and I know he'd point that out himself, but great season.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that shows how well Judd started the season as well, getting to 3 of those 4 finals that you mentioned. Actually didn't even play the Championship League, so 3 finals on the spin, winning 2. Amazing stuff. He was brilliant right from the start of that Shanghai one. I suppose that was what Kyren's only worrying bit, wasn't he? He lost that first game 6-0 to Zhou Long.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone was like, oh God, he's gonna really struggle as world champion. And he won the next tournament, so not a problem.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And well, it was a sign of things to come, very much to Kyren and Judge show, as you rightly said in that last episode, no wrong answers for the player of the season. Many will go for Judd. He might win it. But to him and Kyren, very much the top 2 performers, really. And Mark Williams, who's just lost the world final, well, sort of half forget he won this. So I looked back and I thought, oh, yeah, of course, won the champion of champions, beating Zhao Xintong 10-7 in the final. But we'll go back before that, actually, and talk about the English Open. Neil Robertson got his hands on that trophy, beating Wu Yize 9-7. Robertson back in the winner's circle. I think we thought it would come. Might not have thought it would come that early, but, real application from Neil, getting his head down like he said he would. And he did the job there. Mark Selby won the British Open, beating John Higgins 10-5 in the final. Another defeat for Higgins in the final, but he would eventually put that right, of course, as the campaign came towards its closing stages. Zhao Xintong, congratulations to him, of course, winning the Wuhan Open, beating Junhui 10-7 in the final. First ranking title for Zhao. Kyren Wilson, can't keep a good man down, won again, Northern Ireland Open, beating Judd Trump 9-3 in the final. And then Ding Junhui, outrageous 5-year wait for a player of generational quality. He won the International Championship, beating Chris Wakeley in 10-7 in the final. And then that Mark Williams winner, the champion of champions. I don't mind getting my dates mixed up a bit, Phil, here. There's no rules here, especially at this late stage of the season. And I say Mark getting the job done, winning that fine tournament. So the class of 92 continuing to shine. So, yeah, Ding 5 years is mad, isn't it? And I noticed how everyone was commenting. I mean, Mark Allen commented on it. Just silly, Phil Haig.
Yeah, yeah, because I think that took him to 15 title ranking titles. So it shows how regularly he was racking them up earlier to then have a 5 year wait to get to number 15. But yeah, brilliant stuff. That sort of forgot about that mad Kyren Judd final in Belfast.
Mm.
9-3. I think Kyren was 7-0 up, which he would have got
I've
outrageous
forgotten
odds
that.
on that happening against Judd Trump.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. Um, yeah, and that Selby was brilliant in that British. And yeah, we won. What a mad final that was. I watched some of that in an airport in Budapest. They had that on the telly there. But yeah, uh, Zhao and Wakelin, I've mentioned this a few times, just great examples of players that can make a step up. And they've both done that very impressively this season.
They have moved on to the UK Championship, of course, prestigious event. As ever, Judd Trump won it, got his hands on the title again, beating Barry Hawkins 10-8 in the final. I mean, we couldn't help but feel sorry for Barry. He made a real fight of it. I mean, he played very well against Ronnie, of course, famously in that World Final. I think he lost by 6, but he's never been close in the Triple Crown final, Barry. Great performance. In fact, I spoke to him after that night, and he was sometimes Barry, you sometimes think, isn't quite as gusty as he should be. He's a bit of a rude way of saying it, but he's such a nice guy. But that night, I think, really affected him more than most. And of course, we also heard that night. Now I think about it, very sadly, that Terry Griffiths has died, and we should now say, as I remember, that of course we lost a number of people, didn't we, throughout the season, including Terry and Ray Reardon, who of course I did like Mark Williams saying, Phil, during this tournament, particularly in the final, he had Terry Griffiths on one shoulder and Ray Reardon on another, and how poignant is that, thinking about those two wonderful world champions, Reardon a 6-time world champion, and Griffiths, of course, world champion in 1979. And they both had influence later on. Terry is an unbelievable, brilliant coach, one of the best ever, really. And Ray, of course, with that sort of burst back into public consciousness really when he helped Ronnie O'Sullivan, of course, when one of his earlier world titles. He was such a big influence on Ronnie at that time. So we'll always miss those, and those names, Terry and Ray and various others we lost, will sort of be talked about, as long as snooker people get together for sort of years and generations to come. And we should say, of course, as well, that Tom Ford won the shootout, beating Lee Ingraham in the final. Lei Pei Fan won the Scottish Open, beating Wu Yiza. That was world number 84, Lei. That's the lowest ranked winner of a ranking event there for more than 3 decades. And Mark Allen, who did not have the season he wanted, well, he did win big in certain money terms, certainly, winning the latest edition of the Saudi Invitational. That took us to the end of the year, Phil, at Christmas. And then afterwards, Shaun Murphy won the Masters, beating Kyren Wilson 10-7 in the final. We know a bit more about that speech from Kyren afterwards now. There was a little bit of pointedness now. We know that. Kyren won the German Masters. I was delighted to be at the Tempodrome to see that. Great final. Poor old Barry Hawkins again, this time losing in the decider 10-9. Mark Selby won the non-ranking version of the Championship League. And it was Mark Selby again backing that up with victory in the Welsh Open, beating Stephen Maguire 9-6 in the final. So around about that time, and obviously you later went on to reach the tour final, the people started tipping Mark more and more for the world title. I think if Mark's looking this good a couple of months away, this is looking good for his chances. But obviously we saw 2 triple crowns there, Phil, won by great stars of the game. And good finals, Judd against Barry, Shaun against Kyren. Real competitive final. Shaun was quite a way ahead actually in the Masters final, wasn't he? Kyren came back late on and they made a real fight of it. So, yeah, but I really enjoyed sort of both those finals. And yeah, I mean, Shaun just blitzed the Masters, didn't he? He just brilliant all week. That stomping around the table, looked like he owned Ali Pali, loved his performances there. And I think most people in the game, sometimes it can be a bit of a Marmite figure, but I was struck on Radio Snooker, actually. He wasn't particularly Marmite on there. Nearly everyone seemed to be going for Shaun that night. He got a great reception. It was a smashing win for him.
Yeah, that tournament was great, I thought, because we had that crazy story of Ronnie pulling out just before he started. So that was a load of drama there. But then the snooker was brilliant. Obviously, Shaun's 147 having narrowly missed the 147.
Mm-hmm.
And he played so well. That crazy match early on where Robertson beat Higgins from behind. Um, Judd like smashed Ding in an amazing performance, and then lost to Kyren, didn't he? Yeah, it was just a really good addition, I thought, and the UK was good as well. I remember thinking early on, Judd looked like he was going to go out there when everyone was struggling with the conditions. Then he squeaked past Higgins, and then looked good, so good from there on in. So yeah, a couple of good tournaments.
Definitely. John Higgins won the World Open. We were getting towards the business end, your beloved business end, Phil, beating Joe O'Connor 10-6 in the final. John back in the winner's circle at last. I mean, we couldn't believe it. 4 years on from, it was the players, wasn't it, that he won in such blistering style. Couldn't believe it. Talk about Ding Junhui weight. We couldn't believe it in the John Higgins sense. And we particularly couldn't believe it when you think how many finals he was in. Kept losing them winning positions, but he got the job done. That was that win against Zach Shirty that he looked like he'd almost lost that game in the semi. These are the funny ways, sort of, not careers, it's too late in that sense for John, but his late career turned on moments like that. He could win more, who knows? Sure, he's more than capable. Neil Robertson, unsatisfying final, actually won the World Grand Prix, beating Stuart Bingham 10-0. Not a big fan of whitewashes. That was a tournament in Hong Kong, of course. Part of that series went out to China. And then back in the UK, it was Kyren Wilson, again, winning his fourth tournament of the season, winning the Players' Championship, beating Judd Trump 10-9 in the final. Really exciting final there. Really exciting final in Manchester. My goodness, John Higgins winning that Tour Championship, beating Mark Selby at 10-8 in the final, 8-5 down, wasn't he? Came back to win it. Hell of an effort. And then, of course, we've just seen the biggest snooker show of all, Zhao Xintong winning the World Championship, beating Mark Williams 18-12 in the final. What a season, Phil. I'm glad I shared it with you. I mean, so many ups and downs. What John Higgins did there in those early weeks of the spring was sort of stunning, wasn't it, really? You know, to win one, to back it up, pure sport.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, it was great, and he did well in those two in the middle as well. I think it was a quarterfinal and a semi-final in between those two wins. I think I meant to mention before. It's funny how these things happen. Stephen Maguire getting to that Welsh Open final, and that was like, oh, he's back. This is a great sign for Maguire. He's played one game since that, and he lost it heavily in World Championship qualifying because he hadn't qualified for the World. Then he had a back problem, and I don't know if he was still struggling with that at the Worlds, but he lost quite heavily to Gao Yang. So these things happen where it's like, oh, this could mean something, and it means quite the opposite sometimes. But yeah, that I think that Players' Championship almost got forgotten about quite quickly. But I'd say you don't get too many deciding frame finals between the great rivalry of the season as well, Kyren against Judd. So worth not forgetting that one.
Yeah, you're both saying it worth not forgetting. That was it for the season then, and we turn to any other business. You can hear on Radio Snooker my commentary on the climax of the World Final and hear reaction from a number of voices live from the Crucible, including from Barry Hearn, who joined me. I was delighted to get a few words with Barry. He talks about the new world champion. Did bring up the situation of the band with Barry as well, and also got a word with him about this interminable Crucible debate. Barry Hearn saying he wants an answer by the end of the year. There wasn't as much about it this year, actually. There was some quite Hearn-led, actually, but Snooker took over. And as Dave Hendon pointed out on Radio Snooker, I also heard this from, I think, our colleague Shane McDermott, Rob Maul as well, perhaps our friends from the press room. Last year, I thought it was very underwhelming for the tournament, but stories-wise, with loads on the Crucible debate, the threat of the breakaway out was really big. This year, we didn't have that many stories, but the snooker was so good, that sort of didn't matter as well. So it's funny the way each tournament sort of differs. World seniors, as we said earlier, live in the UK on Channel 5 throughout the week at the Crucible. Good luck to organisers and everybody involved and playing, especially, of course, in that tournament. And what else can I say? Bit word perhaps from other sporting matters. Liverpool have won their 20th league title. And there's lots to be decided still as the football season draws to a close. We're going to have, I think, our annual break, Phil, and maybe potentially our longest break since we've had this podcast, frankly. We'll be back in June with you. So loads of other events in sport, of course, to take place while we're away, including majors in golf and tennis, and a number of big racing occasions, including the Derby at Epsom. That's it, Phil, I think, from us. We've just about got there. about an hour and a half. So, you know, why break the habit of a lifetime and not do a marathon episode at the end of another marathon season? Thanks for your company. I've enjoyed it, immensely as ever. We'll be back for more. A word about the summer. David Hendon will join us for a summertime special. We're really looking forward to that. Talking a lot about the game, of course, with Dave and the season we just seen and the new season to come, and some more, I'm sure, about Dave's new book on the history of snooker. We'll also hope that Michael McMullen will join us as well, Phil. I've had a word with Michael and said, got to get you on. And, that'll be brilliant. And all being well, Tom Rowell as well from WST will join us in the summer months, the quieter months. Well, they're not quite as quiet these days. Tends to be quite a few tournaments. And if you're thinking, then what about the players? Well, we promise you we will have players. They'll always be our priority on here. So we'll have lots of playing voices for you. We haven't arranged that yet, but they'll bearing in mind we've got those other voices that I told you about, we'll definitely make a priority of getting some players here on the air for you throughout the summer. Our summer season then will be with you when we return, but we are going to have a break now. We'll miss it, but the same token, I'm all snooking out, Phil.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, that won't stop me watching the seniors for a bit
No,
and then
or me.
frantically following the scores from Q School when that kicks off, which is soon. There really isn't that much break at all year of some sort of snooker being played. But yeah, we'll pop off for a while, and we'll be back soon enough. Don't worry about that. Because there will be news racking up. No, we've not on the calendar yet, which I think is quite weird. That usually comes out during the Worlds, doesn't it? But we'll round up all the news while we're away and come back, and you could probably understand what I'm saying by June, hopefully.
Yeah, of course, we are expecting a June start for the new season, and we'll be back there in good time for that. And yeah, what can we say really? I mean, listen, I think that correspondence sort of summed it up a little bit in terms of how much the game means to some of you. It means an immense amount to us. I'm not a big fan of the phrase snooker family, but listen, the snooker community, probably a better phrase, and I did enjoy their company. Some wonderful characters in Sheffield, and those that couldn't be there, many of you there in spirit. I know some of you the other side of the world. Of course, you can't be there, but I know you'd have watched it on television and enjoyed it greatly. And there's no tournament quite like it. And it gave us a big story. First Chinese world champion. It gave us plenty of complications too, but it was certainly an immense event to follow. And the season has been, full of twists and turns and drama. And we'll do it all again for you in 25-26 on Talking Snook. And we'll try and get it right next time, Phil. Great to see you. My final salute. Goodbye. Have a great break and look forward to joining you for our summer season for loads more snooker chat.
Absolutely, yeah. Pleasure as always. Another great season. And thanks so much, everyone, for listening. It was brilliant to bump into some of you in Sheffield. That was a real treat. And yeah, we'll speak to you very soon.
And Brian Campbell with the Talking Snooker T-shirt, the fashion accessory, the fashion accessory of the season. Brilliant stuff with our names on the back. Yeah, and some people saying, it's their call. They seem compass mentis when they were saying it. They were saying that your victory and your success did take a bit of attention away from the main event in the arena. That seems mad. That seems silly. But if they're saying it, why should we challenge it? I don't want to challenge everyone's view, left, right, and centre. That's what they've got to say. And Phil is the world champion, the media world champion. But we finished by saying that, of course, Zhao Xintong is China's first world champion, a genuine moment of history in the game. Thank you, everybody, for sharing this season with us. We're glad we shared it with you out there. And Talking Snooker will be back after a break for a whole new season in 25-26. And we just appreciate you being there, all your correspondence, your support, your kind words, meeting some of you. And it just means an awful lot to us as this podcast continues to rack up the years. Bit of life left in it yet, I'd say. And for now, from your old friends, Phil Haig and Nick Metcalf. Cheerio.